Well, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us today, and for all those who are enjoying this presentation at a later time. My name is Brent Stubbs. I'm the Vice President for Economic Development at Savannah Technical College, and this presentation today is the culmination in a 5-part business survival series. And I highly encourage you to go back and to listen to the other presentations because they were powerful. I have put a link in the comments to the YouTube channel, or you can simply Google Savannah Tech YouTube channel and find the playlist Business Survival. Well, today's presentation is going to be absolutely excellent, and I'm very pleased that you have joined us. When this pandemic started, I rallied together both internally and externally some of the very best partnerships and resources that we had as a college. And today's presentation represents a partnership we have with SCORE Savannah. And before this, I didn't know Sorel, but Sorel Ferrer has been a SCORE mentor since 2018. But she has over 15 years of experience in the telecom sectors. And Mrs. Ferrer continues to advise and enable businesses on topics of how to leverage technology to support business objectives, as well as assist them in innovating and developing a customer-centered approach to managing their business. Although she's still active in the corporate world, she is driven by her volunteer work not only with SCORE but with other organizations across multiple sectors. She is a transplant from Canada, but we won't hold that against her. As the hostess city, we welcome all of our foreign travelers, and I as well am a transplant from Florida. So many of you might identify with that. But without any further ado, Mrs. Ferrer, please. We look forward to hearing from you. And I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can, and it sounds great.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Brett mentioned, I am with the SCORE Savannah, and I've been a SCORE mentor for since 2018, and I have the privilege to connect and provide guidance for entrepreneurs and business owners in the Savannah area. It is an honor for me to be here, and an honor that you are sharing your time with us today. We're going to be talking about business continuity, and this conversation is going to be high level just because the activities related to business continuity are deep and wide. So it is not possible during just a 1-hour session to have a deep dive around that, but hopefully with the guidance that we're going to be providing today, you're going to have a very good idea of how to proceed. And we're gonna get started. Our agenda for today, you may have heard the term business continuity and you may have heard the term disaster recovery. So we're going to kind of make the distinction what each one means and where are the differences, why having a business continuity plan is important, the benefits of having one and the consequences or possible consequences of not having one, the elements of a good business continuity plan, and next steps. Before we dive into our session today, I want to, for those of you who may be on the line that are not aware of the work that SCORE does and how our presence in Savannah and how you can leverage our services moving forward in the future, SCORE is the nation's largest provider of mentoring services and educational programs. Free mentoring services and educational programs. So we want to believe that we are a very good kept secret in Savannah, but we are here to assist you from the moment that you have an idea for a business or whether you are in business already, to help you in any step of your journey as an entrepreneur. As an organization, we were founded in 1964. There are over 300 chapters across the US. And the organization is held by the wonderful work of volunteers. So a number of highly skilled and expert individuals are the foundation for SCORE. As it relates to our chapter, which is closer to you and to your heart, we're in Savannah. We're also in the greater Savannah area, and we have 45 volunteers working for the chapter. We've had the incredible honor of work with some entrepreneurs in the Savannah area, and last year we helped establish 131 new local businesses. That means that 366 people were able to join, maybe a new work or provide for their families in those businesses that we established. And right now we're doubling down in our efforts to support the businesses that are still running and helping those businesses that are shut right now but that will need to reopen or will like to reopen after things go back to whatever normal looks like following. As it relates to the situation around COVID-19, we have a brief poll here. So I want to hear from you whether or not you've heard about business continuity or no. Not familiar. Very familiar. Okay, split half and half. Great. So for some of you that are very familiar, I would like to understand if there's a particular area that you are hoping that you will see today, so that we can drill down maybe towards the end, given that the presentation, the content of the presentation is very specific. But for those of you who are not familiar, we're going to be talking about exactly what is business continuity, what is a business continuity plan. So first and foremost, you may have heard of these terms, or you will hear these terms used interchangeably. And in reality, they are not. The scope of what each one does is different. A business continuity plan and the strategy for business continuity is a proactive effort. It's something that you sit down, plan in advance to ensure that your business or mitigate the risk of your business as it is impacted for a particular crisis or an event. So the aim of the business continuity is to keep the business open and running during and immediately after a crisis or an event. Disaster recovery, on the other hand, which you're going to hear as well a lot from IT folk. This word is used heavily and leveraged heavily, this concept in IT. Is a reactive effort. It's something that you can plan for to an extent. You can have an idea and you can have certain things in place, but it's not until the actual event or crisis happens that you're going to be able to see whether or not things are going to as you plan them. So this is the purpose of having a disaster recovery plan in place, is to bring the business back to normal operations, similar in any shape or form to what they were before before the event hit. So one thing is to keep the business open, like pretty much like we've seen in the last few weeks. A ton of restaurants, hairdressers, people that offer personal services, they needed to shut down immediately. Some of them were not able to continue. Some of them are coming back to normal. So there's a distinction between the two. Now, as it has been evident in the last 13 weeks since the vast majority of the states went into shutdown or in shelter-in-place order, the second week of March, we've seen that not having a plan in place, how would most of us know somebody or know a business owner that will have been able to continue to operate, and some others that needed to shut down almost immediately after, and they haven't been able or lost their business, and we may be wondering what made the difference, what happened. So let's discuss a little bit more in depth around why is it important to have a business continuity plan. Now, some of the triggers for having this, some people have heard of business continuity or having a business continuity plan for the first time, despite being in business or belonging to an organization, being a part of the staff of an organization, maybe a small business themselves. They're hearing about this concept for the first time. And it is hard to believe that of this concept of having an emergency plan as well. Some people will refer to that as an emergency plan, but will certainly kind of put it in the bucket of what do we need in case of an accident, of things that are more immediate. The vast majority of business owners, or they are not thinking about things that are out of that you cannot predict. So not only right now, COVID has made evident that we need to be more aware of the things that are triggering this. So not only we are being exposed more frequently to more types of events, but also the severity of those events, either natural events or human-driven events, it has increased. So the exposure to them. And also we've been exposed more and more in the level of complexity and interdependency of our networks. Not only technology, how we're dependent on technology, but also our supply chains, the different ways in which one business exists because another one also exists, or to serve a different one. So these triggers now are kind of evident. We are the poll that we have in front of us. It is, I see that for a good number here, COVID-19 impacted in a way that is maybe definitely. So we want to help prepare you better, whether you can reopen or whether you're thinking as an entrepreneur. We have a high tolerance for risk. So even though this may be a setback, many of you may be thinking, I want to go back out there and start a business again. So this will definitely help with the planning of that. Some of the benefits of having a business continuity plan relate to mitigating costs. So you were not expecting, you woke up and all of a sudden, I know the example of a business is called Farm Girl Flowers in San Francisco. And this person has had this business for 10 years now, and they were mission driven. They wanted to bring not only people that were growing flowers in a sustainable way. They were very specific, but their supply chain was also very customized for their business. And part of when San Francisco was or California was one of the first states that went into shelter-in-place orders, and they needed to shut down in the span of 12 hours. Now, regardless of, I'm not going to go into a lot more details around that business, but part of the things that you could benefit from when a situation like this, COVID-19 and the news about COVID-19 were already out there, but the immediacy of California, all businesses that are non-essential need to close by tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It will add a layer of activities that you need to put in place. So having this scenario planned for, if you will, it will have a significant benefit in cost mitigation, a competitive advantage as well. Having a plan in place will help you because you already know, maybe you've already played a similar scenario. So let's be clear about what we're talking here. No one has ever been exposed, unless you're 100 years old, which was the last kind of pandemic of these proportions in 1918. We've been exposed to several natural disasters and things like this, but never in the proportions that we are now, like the whole world is shut down. So, but outside of that particular aspect of COVID-19, planning for different scenarios. If you live in certain areas, if you live in Savannah and you have a business close to Tybee Island, you know that you have to plan for flooding, right? You know that you have to plan for maybe emergency procedures, measures. So how would that impact your supply chain? Would you need to shut down? When are you going to shut down? How early, how late? Things like that will have an impact in costs, and it will help you as well come back from that faster. Maybe there's no beautiful way to say it. You're going to be better prepared than many competitors that do not have a business continuity plan in place. So you not only you'll recover faster, but also you can mitigate properly damages, for example, losses, sometimes even loss of life. You can plan accordingly. And also, your business can come back and open its doors faster because you've planned for at least some of these scenarios. So you're the first one out to go back and serve your customers. And if we've identified anything or noticed anything out of COVID, the needs do not go away. The needs will remain. It's the delivery of those of the way that we provide for those needs that it's changing. So one wouldn't believe that gyms, and providers of gym equipment and home gym equipment will be thriving right now. And they are, because people are now switching. The need to be entertained, the need to take their mind off things, regardless of the situation, is still there. So those businesses were able to respond faster, given certain things that they have in place. The consequences, of course, are directly proportionate to that. If you don't, the disruption to business, some businesses had to shut down. They were not able to pivot. So we've all heard of a number of examples of businesses in the hospitality industry, restaurants that needed to shut down. Like, they are not open, they needed to shut down, and they're not going to open moving forward. Whereas others were able to kind of become hubs for distribution. They became, for example, they were able to provide different types of services. They were now putting together a bag or particular items, grocery items for their customers and for takeout. So they were able to pivot. Something was in place there that allowed them to keep the doors open and the business running despite the situation. So their business disruption time was less than any other thing that you've seen. In terms of damage and losses, uncertainty is definitely something that you cannot immediately quantify. But once you're deeper into the situation or getting out of the situation, you will notice that maybe if you will have planned for X, Y, or Z, or things that maybe a particular subset of your staff will have known, you could have mitigated some costs. And obviously the possibility of shutting down permanently is something that could be pondered by this very fact that you had a plan in place. If you're to this very last point, I want to comment on a study made by the industry of safety for businesses, and there was a Harvard study as well that was published last year, and that Harvard study referenced was talking about recovering from recessions. So, and it's this article, I've added that link into the resources slide, which is part of this presentation, so that you can refer to it. But that article referred that all the businesses, and they analyzed the recessions in the 80s, the 90s, and the year 2000s. And the businesses that were able to come back and open their doors in a better shape were those that the single factor that made the difference between how fast they recovered versus those who were not able to recover as fast, or that were not able to recover at all. An astounding 9% of businesses was because they had a plan in place. That was the common factor across all of them. They thrive. Not only they were able to come back faster, but they thrive after the recessions. So that is how, if you're doubting or if you're not convinced just yet about exactly why you should have, regardless of whether you're a small business or you're a medium-sized business, or if you need to propose this for the business that you are working for, this is a very good and compelling reason. Now, let's discuss a little bit about the elements of the business plan. So in here, we're outlining kind of the bigger activities that you need to go through. And as we walk through these, if you need to boil down this to three main activities, it will be creating your team, developing a plan for the multiple scenarios that you may encounter. So you're going to have to use your imagination and think, what will happen if I need to shut down, if my supplier shut down, if half of my staff cannot come, if I lose this particular part of the business, or if everything shuts down in the systems and things like that. So if you need to boil down these three main things, is to put together the 2 or 3 individuals that are going to help you. This doesn't have to be done alone. If you're a solopreneur, obviously you're going to have to do it, but
Sorel, it looks like we just lost her audio. She'll be right back. Um, so let's put a poll question up here. So many people have been impacted, and businesses certainly impacted by COVID-19. Maybe in the comments, when you look at these, putting your team together, identifying your essential services or functions, and I know that many of you mentioned not necessarily knowing much about business continuity. Which of these seem like the hardest to kind of get your mind around? It's kind of reading through this. If those of you who are in session wanted to go to the chat box, and you could leave kind of which of these seem to be the stickiest or hardest.
And I'm going to provide details for each one of them, so to make it easier for you to visualize. And also, I've provided some templates in the resources slide as well, so that you can just need to print those templates and run with this. This is not difficult. The idea here is that we want to be able to think about having a business continuity plan and think of this as you would. Nobody will open a business and not think that they should have their books in order, right? Or their inventory in order, right? So we don't want you to think of this as a chore. We don't want you to take a kind of a negative, like, I need to do this because I need to plan for something that may shut down my business. Very much the contrary. This should not be a chore. This should be something that you think about as a competitive advantage of having. Because this probably will make a difference between moving forward in the event of a crisis and not moving forward. I'm going to talk through each one of them, and I noticed that I had audio issues prior, so I don't know if most of you could hear me mentioning that if you need to boil down this, as many details as I'm going to provide, if you need to boil this down to 3 main activities, is you don't have to do it alone. But to your team, identify the essential services or functions or activities that your business cannot do without. You wouldn't open if those things were not present, and create the plan. So let's get a little bit into each one of them. You may not have a large staff. And Brent, if I get cut off, or if there's something that you're missing in terms of audio, let me know. Or if I'm going too fast as well, anyone from the audience may let me know as well. So when you're putting together the team, it doesn't have to be a large team of people. When we say team, it could be either a team of 2, or even if it's yourself. The important thing is to understand what are the responsibilities when you're coming up with this creation of this plan, developing this plan. So some people are going to be there to do specific things related to the business operations. Others may be there to communicate, for example, but everyone should know exactly what is it that they're responsible for, where are they going to get the information they need to move forward, and what is it that they need to do. So when you're putting together the team, think about that. The second one related to identifying your essential services or functions, there's a great template. It is also known as developing a business impact analysis, and is one of the key areas of these business continuity plans. So because this is where you're going to identify exactly what what are essential services. Is a service that, if it's not delivered, is going to have an impact on the health of your and safety of certain individuals. Something that your business cannot definitely wouldn't have a reason to be open if you were not able to do it. A service that or a function that will lead to failure, that particular activity, you cannot continue, or something depends on it to be able to be provided, or things that you need to do to satisfy or comply with maybe requirements or industry standards or regulatory requirements. So, and things that, you know, if your business may be forced to or mandated, like it was the case, to modify certain things, would you be able to eliminate those? And if so, how are you going to cope? So those are some of the things that you're going to have to think about. What are those essential services or functions or activities that make the core of your business? Another important aspect will be to identify if you're not working out of the ideal circumstances. So your business was mandated to close or shut down. You had to furlough people, but there are some people that are still with you, or you needed to let go of, half of your staff. The other half, are they prepared? Do they have the skills needed for you to continue to work? So it may be anything from having a particular training to handle machinery, for example, or knowledge of particular systems that you need to rely on to provide your services, things like that, right? So in the resources slide, I am providing as well a particular template that you can identify those skills that are needed for those essential services or functions. Part of the if we move towards the, and then also you need to categorize. So even though some activities might be critical for you to continue in business, you may be able to do with, let's say, 2 out of 3, but maybe not 2 out of 3, or maybe there's just one that, even that one, if it's gone, you're not going to be able to proceed. So you want to understand if you need to train people, what are the skills needed. So you notice that even though this is a proactive effort, it is planning for the future, you will need to revisit this on a regular basis. So once you identified if you have the skills or if the skills or requirements needed for you to operate when you're impacted and you're down to essential services or functions, you want to then think about the possible scenarios that you're going to be working out of. So this is what's going to be the core of your plan. So if you were to reduce, modify, or eliminate, some of these functions, or even think about that, how would you be able to manage if you as a result of the event or the crisis or whatever reason, you all of a sudden have a large number of your staff that is not able to come to work, if there's a particular situation in which you are not going to be able to provide for certain safety, even if your staff can show up, are you going to be able to protect them? Is there a physical need to provide for the safety of your employees, like it is now, right? In addition to that, also think about now, I heard a CEO of a large company saying that now all companies are health companies. And if you think about it now, regardless of what is your line of business, now you need to assess whether your employees are, not as something as small as having a fever. So all of a sudden, these health items are now part of what you need in order to move forward with business. So consider what are the different things that you will need, what are the different areas and potential issues that can arise. And then you prepare for that. And last but not least, once you've identified and kind of walk through those scenarios, you put in place what is it that you need. So if the emergency hits in any of these scenarios, what are the things that we need to do? Number one, number two, number three, number four, and so on. So you put that in place, and then you prepared kind of a checklist for that, for each one of the of these scenarios. Again, there are you have to think about this in terms of the impact to not only the business operationally speaking, to your employees, to your customers, whether or not you have relationships with government agencies or other organizations in the community, and as well if you are providing, or your business is also the input for another business. So all these scenarios and this preparedness checklist, you cannot leave any of these things out. And then as we go through the last part, once you prepare that checklist, then you discuss to make sure that you've considered and that you have a robust plan in place. And then you need to review this. So we are coming off the first wave. Some people are calling it the first wave of COVID. We're going to be well into this situation until next year. So, but we are going to come out of this situation. So moving forward, whatever was true and whatever worked right now may or may not work in the future. So you need to review this. You need to also consider that the emergency now is COVID-19 is a global emergency, but there are other regional, so droughts. Think about, or other outbreaks, or a water, for example, water contamination, or something that may happen even in your local area where your business is located, in addition to these things. So that's why you need to plan accordingly and update this plan on a regular basis. So we're saying at least once a year, make a plan to review, test whether or not these things are still true, and maybe regulations change as well, and update the plan accordingly. Before we move to the next slide, Brent, I would like to know if on your end you see any questions maybe posted in the panel or any comments.
I don't see any questions or comments. I would say, in your own experience, whether, in this case we have a health event, but we've had also hurricanes,
Right.
and then there can be, other shocks to a business, like just overall economic, that we think about the banking crisis in 2007, 2008. What have you seen the impact of having business continuity be, in your work?
The most important thing, thank you for the question. The most important thing that I've seen is that businesses that are intentional, or that were intentional about planning for emergency, not relying only on what even when they were doing very well, thinking, what if they were significantly better prepared to face this crisis. Another important thing that I've seen, even more than planning ahead, because as I mentioned, right, if you're in the Savannah area, if you live in certain parts of North Carolina, for example, South Carolina, or in Florida, you need to. It is kind of fairly easy to know that you need to prepare in case of a hurricane, right? Business disruption as a result of these natural disasters that are kind of lurking all the time. But you cannot prepare for an earthquake, for example, right? Or you cannot prepare. There are other things. So, for example, if you think about all these businesses that are in the middle of this trade negotiations, still trade negotiations, right, with Asia. So all these businesses were caught up in a crisis that affects their supply chain. That's something that, a lot of businesses could not necessarily think about, but you need to think about the dependency that you need. And so these crises are, some of them are there, kind of obvious. Others are not. The other thing that I found very, very kind of surprising, but also very good, that I've seen, those businesses that have thrown their preconceptions out the window. They say, well, we're in the middle of something that no one was ever going to predict, or it was impossible to predict that we were going to be affected this way. Let's pivot, let's change, let's open our minds to new business models. So they are testing new things, testing new business model, welcoming more ideas as of how to do business, things that they may have been hesitant to do in the past. So right now, that kind of mindset of, if I want to keep the business open, I need to be flexible and adapt. That is something that I'm seeing as well, that is making a difference.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. So if we're going to go, as I mentioned, to like, what are the next steps for you? You've seen a lot, you're going to see in the templates. The templates provide a ton of contextual information around this. It may be daunting. Again, just boil it down to, if anything, if you are a small business just starting, or if your business is in a particular area that you may say, I don't see clearly how I can create a business continuity plan with all these steps that you're outlining here, do know this. What are the areas identified? What are those essential activities, functions, systems that need with which, if you do not have them or are limited in your access to them, you will not be able to provide your services, or your business will need to close. Think about those first and foremost, and then plan around those. Create a plan to mitigate whatever impact you may have around those. If you're a solopreneur, think about that. Keep a copy of this plan somewhere else in case you cannot access this document, and also do the same even if you have even if you're not a solopreneur. Communicate with your team and say, hey, there's a copy, share that across multiple avenues and channels, so that people have access to that if they cannot go and be present, physically present into the business. Which also brings me to another point, which is think about, if you cannot, we've seen this with COVID, right? Because businesses are shut down, then people cannot go to work to their normal locations, not only for pleasure, like going to, for entertainment, going to the movies or going to restaurants, but those people that work there, they cannot go to their work. Some of them may be able to pivot and work from home. Some others are not able to work home, like in the hospitality industry. But think about, if your business will need, if you're not able to access your location, will you be able to continue to provide your services? And then think about that as well. Make the preparation of this business continuity plan. Share the news, share the good news of how better off you are. Don't think about yourself only. If you notice that you have certain dependency on a certain provider, a partner, somebody in your supply chain, make sure that they also have a business continuity plan, because you want to be aware, if you depend on that, like many restaurants there, if you're going to have access to that, if have planned for that, what would they do if the same situation hits both of you? Would you be able to come together? So you want to think about also location. Don't leave that out. Once you have something in place, then no one is better to share that with across your, not only your customers or any other business partners. So as a first step, right, the resources slide that I mentioned, it has templates that you can just print and start working on these things. Identify your team members, or identify that other person that, in addition to you, if you're a solopreneur, or if you have only a couple of people in your business, identify those people that will know about this, and start discussing the idea and creating your plan. And then, create that checklist. Make sure that everyone knows what to do, what they're responsible for, and where the input to do that, and where to go. And then discuss it and make sure that you have it. It could be something very simple, depending on your business, until you grow, and then you need to put a little bit more detail into it. Um, at a very high level, that was it for me. One thing that I would like to add is that if you're coming from, let's say, what your business is an app, or you provide services that are over the internet, for example, you have a platform, a publishing platform, or things that are dependent on services and things like that, the you may want to think about things, or you may hear more often about like redundancy. How can we connect? What are our systems going to look like? And some significant challenge that many of the departments of finance faced during this crisis was the need to close their books while not on location, on premise. And I've heard several of customers bringing that up. So it seems I'm not familiar with the practices of financial practices and accounting practices, but it seems that it was something very impactful for them. So think about that, not only the location if you cannot access it, but also systems that you may need to rely on. Do you have redundancy? Do you have a way of, not only backup of your data, things like that? Think about all these scenarios, like run your business step by step and see if one part of the business is not present, if you can continue, and how you can access that part of the business if that were to be taken suddenly, as it is in the case of crisis or particular events. Any comments, any questions?
So if someone was writing a business continuity plan, how many pages should it be? I mean, how detailed? Some personalities can think, okay, I want this plan to be something that can I can go to, and so it wouldn't take them long to imagine a 100-page plan.
Right.
What is? But some personalities can't. They're like, okay, great, we got that covered. Check, check, check. And so there's probably some happy medium. What's the best practice in terms of building a continuity plan?
It's a great question, and some of these the eternal answer will be it depends. So we're not going to be talking about beyond the number of pages is the level of details that you want. So if you're a small business, it will highly depend on what are those activities that are essential. Somebody in the tech sector may have more essential activities and functions than somebody that is in the maybe in another type of business. Somebody with a particular supply chain, for example, or particular business model. So somebody with an e-commerce model or business to consumer model may have more activities in that. So I wouldn't focus so much on the amount of pages, but I will say this: don't overcomplicate it, because you also, focus on the essentials. Focus on those activities that you cannot do without. If you were to shut down part of the business, or if they were to be affected. So it's a long-winded. It's depend.
Sure. Well, and so we had another great question. Nadia Osman, she said, who should be involved in the development of your business continuity plan within the company? Who should be involved?
That is a great question, and certainly something that you need to consider. Probably, let's talk about what does this person need to understand or to know, right? So depending on the size of your company and what is your area, what is your business, the industry, you will need to understand like organizational objectives, or be able to make decisions. So there needs to be a particular, I don't want to say profile, but if not, then you need to enable that person. So in large companies, you may want to have somebody from operations, ideally somebody from each area. If you're a small company, you as the business owner, and then your second, your right hand person. Um, because this is the team that will come up with the plan itself. The execution of that, you may involve others as collaborators, but they don't have to be there as part of the plan. The team that we're talking about is the team that will react and make sure that the business continue running. So these people may be the ones telling, the rest of the staff, you need to move in this direction. So you don't need to involve everyone, but somebody from operations. If you have a large organization, definitely somebody from IT, definitely somebody from operations, and definitely somebody from even human resources is what we usually see. And if you're a small business, you and maybe your right hand person.
I like to think of, let me give you kind of two questions. Sorel, if I could join you in this,
Yeah.
because I'm a part of developing these plans at the college. I think that who's impacted and how or where. So kind of like if you use who, it's that very simple, like who, where, and how.
Right.
And if you start to think about those three questions, it kind of will direct your mind to think, okay, I know, for example, we're impacted at the front desk, but what is that really, how? And by how this way and this way, it kind of works your way back to, okay, I need to involve a person from our operations and I need someone from sales. Do I need someone from
Correct.
sales? Really,
Correct.
yeah, just IT.
Correct.
And you start to think of the ecosystem of your business as these different tentacles that are interacting in different ways and have different support structures. And so as long as you have all those stakeholders to the table, one of the things that I've, and got another great question here. And I'm gonna and I'll take one shot at Sorel, and then I'm gonna.
There are two questions. One follow-up question from Nadia and another one from us.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very good. But yeah, that idea that the worst thing that can happen though is that you would write, and this probably ties into it, is that someone writes a continuity plan without the input of someone who is operationally in that area day in and day out, and without any input. That becomes kind of something there where you will find out about its vulnerabilities when you go through what we could call a dynamic event.
Right.
But go ahead, Sorel. We've got two questions. How and when should you communicate the BP to the entire team, the business plan, the continuity plan? Yeah, and then go ahead.
So make it part of for example, if you're hiring, make sure that your new hires are aware of that. That should be part of their onboarding. If this is the first time that you're coming up with this, right? So new hires are going to be immersed in this regardless. But for the people that were there before you actually had a business continuity plan, make it an enablement and training session. So plan for that. And once you've made sure that 100% of the company is aware of the plan, where should they go? What should they do? Maybe some people are going to be impacted and going to have to execute on the plan, but they don't lead on the plan. So that goes back to your question as well before of who should be aware. So you need to have somebody working the comms, right? If I'm an employee of a restaurant and the restaurant has been impacted by flood, for example, I cannot just assume that I don't have a job anymore and that because the location was flooded, I'm not needed anymore. Somebody needs to reach out to me. So for that, and the COVID situation is extreme. So let's make that clear. This is extreme. The possibilities of having this again, no one with certainty. We may say Bill Gates knew it, but and he was again and again talking about this. But the actual how this is evolving, no one can know for sure. So you may need to review these at least once a year. And provide refreshes. So think of this as compliance with the business continuity plan. Think of it as one of the requirements and have your employees go through that and refresh that at least once a year. Make it one of the activities of human resources if you have a human resources department, or as part of the things that when they need to re-skill for a particular, or keep a license or things like that, think about that. You need to renew those licenses every so often. Do the same with the business continuity plan. And of course, the team that is working with in that plan has to update that plan accordingly. Like whomever came up with a plan that is working for COVID, I guarantee you that that plan has been updated multiple times, even if they were somewhat prepared for something like this. So the team will always review it. The rest of the company will, and the broader audience should be updated at least once a week. And then to address Astrid's question regarding the vulnerabilities, nothing, when you're planning for uncertainty, you're planning for the future. So unless you have a crystal ball, you will never be 100% accurate. The purpose of having a business continuity plan is to mitigate as much as possible. So part of that will come directly related to the level of detail that you come up with when you're reviewing your essential services, activities, functions, and systems. So the more detail, it's not something as, if you leave it high level, oh, I know that I need to be able to access, my accounting system, my inventory system, and maybe my order intake system. And all of them run on the internet. It will never go away. That is too high level. So it will have, by design, you're already making it vulnerable, because what if you don't have internet? Everything is in the cloud. Do you have backups of that? Are you able to access the data? So think about something as simple as the data, malware or cyber attacks, right? You don't have to think about a catastrophe or something as impacting us COVID. What a bit, like in the last year, we've heard a ton in the news about this kind of cyber hostage situation in which counties and large organizations are rendered, are halted because of these things. So, the more detail that you put in those essential activities, functions, systems, and services that you provide, the better you're going to be equipped to address those. But definitely there is not 100% accuracy, because you're planning for the future, a future that is not here, a future that you cannot predict. You can only predict so much of how it can go from one way or the other. One thing, for example, that no one was to give you just an example, one catastrophe has nothing to do or doesn't wait for COVID to end. So now a hurricane can come, or an earthquake, and they don't care about COVID. Absolutely. So there's only so much that you can plan for, right? So the level of detail that you put in there will help you get closer to some of the things that are business disruptive or mitigate that, but it will never be 100%.
That's a great point, Sorel, because I think that looking at as this business continuity plan, what it's going to enable you to do is actually have your nerves readied, be calm, to make all the decisions that you can't anticipate, because you're going to have things coming at you. And we've learned this with COVID. When this all first started, all of the bandwidth wasn't good enough, and internet connection started to open that up, right? Companies. There's just so many different, we didn't think about the fact that we were sending kids home and parents, and there wasn't devices one-to-one for all of those. So those were things we couldn't anticipate. I mean, certainly we can begin to think about what that might be like. But, business continuity, I think, just to your point, Sorel, is really about giving you a firm foundation to then make those ad hoc decisions you're going to have to make in the middle of a dynamic situation.
I wouldn't have put it best.
Yeah.
You just said it exactly the way it should be. It's like, what are the things that I can plan for so that I don't have to think about them on the go, so that I have the mental space to be able to with a good footing, be able to move forward with those decisions that I cannot anticipate right now.
I think that was even better said. So I think that was even better said. Any more questions?
I just want to make sure that people are aware, when you receive this presentation, the resources slide is attached to the deck.
Excellent. This has been a great presentation. I know that business continuity is something everyone's thinking about today, and it's about giving you confidence you need to kind of sail through the stormy waters. We learned as a college that we actually had. I learned that we had a plan for things, and this is one of the things to remember is Sorel mentioned that you would train your folks. Um, this is actually Nadia. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, when is the next topic? Um, this is the last in this series, but I did put a link to all the others, and we are planning on offering some more training sessions in the future. So we'll make sure to let you know. Thank you so much for that. Um, but just
I
just
will.
wanted to, just wanted to say that you know you're going to take a plan that's probably very detailed in a large organization like a college with all the different stakeholders and constituencies and different moving parts and pieces. We're going to have a very um, a very detailed plan. Now, how that plan gets communicated out, people aren't going to walk around every day in your business thinking, I know what to do if there is
Right.
a chemical weapon that explodes.
Right.
You don't want them talking to a customer thinking every minute what happens if an active shooter occurs, God forbid. But you do have those plans, and there's the ways that you train for it, and there's the way that you communicate it. And this was just very, very helpful. I see a question here about a newsletter or email list that you can sign up for. So we have collected all the emails for this, and you will see some future communication, Nadia. So by registering for this event, we have your email address, and we will certainly be reaching out to you in the near future. Thank you so much.
One thing that I would like to ask from our audience is that now that you know this, if it's new to you, it is probably new for somebody that you know at another company or another business owner or something like that. Please, share the link, the YouTube link. I don't know, Brent, this is a public link, so that people can prepare. Something that was obvious is that a lot of people were not prepared, were never heard of a business continuity plan, and it will have made the difference, to all the small businesses that had shut down in the last 3 months.
Absolutely. This will be publicly available at the YouTube channel, which I posted at the top of this, and we will be sending it as a follow-up later. Well,
So
Sorel,
spread the. Mhm.
yeah, spread the word. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this great presentation. For everyone that joined us today, we appreciate you. We hope that you continue to stay safe and strong, and that this helps your business be stronger than ever.